The showrunners are lying to you. Remember that, it's important for later. They are dirty, dirty liars. So I've just watched Stranger Things 2 for the first time, and as a writer I have quite a lot to say. We're going to break down the structure, character, that dreadful episode, you know the one, as well as explore if this sequel is worth the slight downgrade from Season 1. This is Stranger Things 2, a very messy sequel. I was nervous going into this series. After enjoying Season 1 much more than I thought I would, I dreaded the disappointment that awaited me this season. I don't know much about Stranger Things, but I know many people say it gets worse with each season, and that's not exactly a review that makes you want to dive further into a show. But I've watched it. After 9 episodes, lots of cups of tea, and far too many puffs on the VAPE, I can finally tick this season off the list. And it's a weird one. It's not dreadful, some of it's amazing, but it's weird. And a lot of that is down to the structure. The structure of Stranger Things 2 is insanely messy, and nothing proves this more than the first 4 minutes of the season. I said in my Season 1 video that the opening 12 pages perfectly sum up the season's strengths, and here it is the complete opposite. We open on a police car chase involving characters that we've never seen before. One of them has powers, and it's revealed that she is one of the other kids from Hawkins' lab due to the tattoo on her wrist. Although, as soon as we meet these new characters, we leave them again, and we don't return to them until episode 7. And what makes this even stupider is once we finally catch up with them again, we realise they have absolutely nothing to do with any of the plot of the season. The opening of a script isn't just a hook, it's a promise you make to the viewer. It's the beginning of a story that you want them to invest quite a few hours of their life into. For that reason, it should be a scene that immediately captures the vibe and the experience an audience member is going to go through. This scene, this opening, makes absolutely no sense until 7 episodes later and has absolutely no consequences. Compare this to Season 1 Episode 1 and the difference is night and day. Season 1, we have the scientist scene, the boys playing D&D, and then Will's disappearance. These 3 scenes set up the story we're about to follow as well as creating the entire atmosphere of the show. This opening teaser does none of that, and the following 45 minutes suffers. Because episode 1 here is incredibly unfocused. We spend a lot of time catching up with old characters and meeting some new ones, but the actual plot feels pretty non-existent. There's hints towards story, with Will seeing the Upside Down and Mike trying to contact Eleven, but for the most part the episode floats from scene to scene, offering very little bite. Scenes should flow, that's how you immerse someone into a story. However, here it's all very segmented, and without that natural transition between one scene to the next, it unfortunately makes everything feel like a subplot. It's as if you're watching a collection of small stories instead of one grand narrative. And that's not to say it's all bad, there's still some lovely moments in it. The show still captures that innocent charm of childhood. Watching Dustin and Lucas fall immediately in love with new student Max is really sweet, but it's not the horror sci-fi mystery I thought I was getting back into. The ending of episode 1 is also really effective. We finally see Eleven in Hopper's home. This scene is lovely, if a little too long. The amount of time we linger on the empty room before Eleven entered kind of spoiled it. It gave me too long to guess. But overall it is a good ending to quite a middling episode, which makes you want to watch the next episode, even if it is just to see this dynamic play out. However, it's this clumsiness that affects the season as a whole. The lack of concrete narrative unfortunately creates too many plots that feel quite boring. I know it was a thing online, but I couldn't give 2 shits about Barb. I'm sorry, she was a character that barely had any screen time. I like that we see Nancy's affected by what happened, that's nice character work, but a whole subplot about getting justice for her? It just seems more like an excuse for Nancy and Jonathan to be together than an actual interesting plot thread. Other plot lines this season start out strong but tend to drag along to fill up the 9-episode runtime. I adore the relationship between Eleven and Hopper, and we'll talk more about that later, but as soon as Elle starts wandering around by herself, the whole thing comes to a halt. It doesn't help that everything she finds out about herself was basically revealed to us last season, so there's no new mystery or twist to grip me. I can't help but want to move on from these scenes before they've even kind of started. The strongest plot by far is Will being possessed by the Mind Flayer. It takes a little time to get going, but once we're there, it's incredibly gripping, offering lots of that horror that I enjoyed so much in Season 1. The ending of Episode 5, where Will is convulsing on the floor, is a beautifully horrific scene that holds just long enough to get under your skin before cutting to black and leaving you with that feeling of dread. And I adore how this story progresses. It becomes hard to know exactly who is speaking. Is it Will or is it the creature? That's what I want from this show, that uncertainty, that promise of something evil. It also means that you as the viewer can guess along. Each scene he's in has this undercurrent of tension. It's so well crafted that it makes the other plots look incredibly weak in comparison. And it's no surprise, the Will storyline has the 3 ingredients that made Season 1 so watchable: the horror, mystery, and character. And that last one is so important, and this season continues to excel in character, for the most part. Let's start with the best and make our way down to the absolutely mind-numbing. Hopper is just magic this season. Out of all the characters, it's his story that feels the most earned. Continuing his story from series 1 just feels right. They gave him so much to work with in season 1 that here they're allowed to explore him more, delving deeper into his psyche. He's a man consumed by grief. He knows he can be an arse, and it's really a struggle for him to keep his emotions from erupting, and that's kind of addictive for an audience to watch. His softer moments are laced with pain as he attempts to bring up Eleven while also mourning the loss of his own daughter. Hopper is incredibly complex, and every scene he's in there's a subtext underneath it which just elevates everything. His argument with Eleven is one of the best scenes in the show. You can see this hint of regret in him even as he continues to get angrier. You want to tell him to stop being an asshole but also give him a hug at the same time. That's good character writing and I can't fault it. The same can be said for Steve. His arc continues to be a highlight of the show. I adore how slowly over time the creators have subverted the jock stereotype, giving us a character that is a lot more complex and subtle than we would usually expect. From his love for Nancy to his bond to Dustin, we slowly begin to see more of his true colours underneath the laddie exterior. And this is purposeful, they haven't just outright changed him. He's complex in series 1 too, he's a bit of a dick at times, but that fragility is still there. I actually adore Steve, and although many of his scenes this season do feel like a subplot, that's okay, because that's exactly what they're meant to be. I also adore how much he's an unwilling participant in most of the story, like he just stumbles upon it by accident. In series 1 he's not meant to be at the Demogorgon fight, this time he's kidnapped by Dustin. He's without a doubt one of the funniest aspects of the show, and they rarely force this. His comedy is natural and down to earth, and I think that's why he was such a fan favourite. Joyce is a woman who in real life would be an alcoholic by now. She lost her son, saw that same son be possessed, went out with someone who called their car the Bobmobile and then had to watch him die. Her electricity bill nearly bankrupted her last season, and this time she's had to pin up hundreds of pages of her son's shit art. Joyce is a saint who needs a stiff drink, a smoke, and probably a good shag, just so she feels something other than the crippling pain and anxiety that consumes her life. I adore Joyce. Played beautifully by Winona Ryder, Joyce grounds the show in a raw naturalism. In a season that's constantly jumping around perspectives, she's one of the only characters the show actually holds on to, allowing her emotions to take centre stage. We feel her pain, her worry, her desire for normality. And this is why her relationship with Bob is so lovely. The writing and the performance is incredibly subtle. We know she loves this man, but if she's actually in love with him is to be debated. Unfortunately, we do take a slight dip in quality when looking at the younger cast. Lucas is given a bit more to do this time round, but it never goes much further than him just having a crush on the new girl. Max is a fun addition, but again, she doesn't really do anything this season. She's kinda just there, and the promise of her family situation was much more exciting than the actual reveal. Her parents are just divorced. Jonathan is insanely watchable due to the layered performance of Charlie Heaton, but his actual arc feels a bit too close to his previous one, just lusting over Nancy and being worried for his brother. Nancy's an interesting character because she has so much promise, but this season unfortunately lumped her with a pretty dull Barb storyline, leaving little room for her to grow further. However, her relationship with Steve was beautifully written. Their breakup felt really real, even if the drunk acting didn't. But trust me, drunk acting is bloody hard, so good on her for giving it a good go. Dustin is a little more complicated. I really like this character and he offers some really good comic relief. Although sometimes it does drift into Marvel territory, it is held in place by a wonderful performance. And Dustin is great in the second half of this story. His relationship with Steve is just a genius choice. This brotherly bond was lovely to watch. It's the one thing I'm excited to see grow in later seasons. My issue is the first half of series 2 makes Dustin a fucking idiot. A dumb character whose choices are extremely hard to understand. Him becoming emotionally attached to this random living foreskin that suddenly grows into a Demogorgon is one of the worst plots I have seen in quite a long time. Because listen, I know he's a child, I'm not expecting him to have the intelligence of an adult, but he is smart. He's the one who knows so much about science and fantasy. As soon as that sluggy freak grows, he should know that something bad is happening. And as soon as Will reveals that he thinks it's from the Upside Down, he should be willing to stomp it dead. An easy fix to this would be by having a new character, let's say Max, find this creature and keep it. And then you have the group continually leaving her out of their discussions, not realising that keeping her in the dark is putting her in danger. I'm not saying this is perfect, but I would forgive someone who doesn't know what happened last year for being stupid. Unfortunately, with it being Dustin, it tips the show into an almost sitcom style, which just doesn't fit the world of the story. The same goes for new character Murray, who I find fucking insufferable. He felt like a character that would be in a parody of this genre, and I know he's back in the next season, and I'm dreading it because I'm pretty sure he becomes the main role, and I really don't want him to. And then we have Eleven. Eleven's archetype, the kid with special powers, is a hard one to pull off. We've seen many shows and films that try to do this and fail miserably, and usually that's because the powers become the most interesting thing about them as characters. I have read far too many scripts that do this, and although they sound cool, they lack the heart that's really needed to get an audience invested. Stranger Things gets this right for the most part. Eleven isn't just her powers, she's not a superhero, she's a kid. A lost child who wants to watch telly and hang out with her friends. It's why her first few scenes are some of the strongest this season, because she's not Supergirl. She's a girl arguing with her adoptive dad. The powers are used in these scenes to amplify the tension, not to create it. However, as the season continues and Eleven ventures out into the wild, things slowly begin to change. It feels very much like a coming of age plot with someone understanding who they are and where they fit into the world, and this is fine. But so much of it is to do with her powers that I feel like I'm watching a superhero origin story, and that bores me. It all becomes about her learning her true past, learning how to control her powers, and if she wants revenge. The innocence is still there, but slowly the subtlety of her character is being stripped away for a more recognisable, predictable hero figure. And it's also unfortunate that the show doesn't always know what to do with her this time round. If she makes it into the plot too early, the entire series is wrapped up, so this journey of self-discovery is necessary more in a structural plot way than actually interesting character development. And of course, this journey leads us to the now infamous Episode 7. The Lost Sister is the first of two lies that the Duffer Brothers have told about this season. I knew going into Stranger Things 2 that there was an episode that the majority of the fanbase hated, however I didn't know which one it was. And honestly, I worried I'd watched it and that people were really overreacting. But no, it's episode 7. The Lost Sister is a bad episode of telly, but a dreadful episode of Stranger Things. It finally reintroduces us to the car chase characters from the season's opening teaser, and we learn they're a group of homeless people who want justice against those who wrong them. And this group are so stereotypical, so blandly crafted that you know exactly where the show is going from the minute they return. They're also incredibly unlikable, not in an interesting flawed way, but in a way that they seem to have no redeeming qualities. They're a collection of side characters that you may meet for 2 minutes in a road trip movie thrown together, and with barely any time to flesh them out in the 50-minute runtime, they are forced into these individual stereotypes. And this episode tries so hard. The music is full blast, the montages are constant, the scene where they're trying on masks and dancing in the van is the most I have cringed at a show for quite a long time. This episode is so desperate to be cool, but that desperation just seeps off the screen. All that mundane naturalism that is used to contrast the fantastical elements of the show are thrown away, and instead everything is heightened into this comic book Scooby-Doo-esque subplot. Oh, and in case you forgot what I just said 2 seconds ago, everything is heightened in this comic book Scooby-Doo-esque subplot. The amount of flashbacks in this episode is insanely annoying. I praised Season 1 for treating its audience as intelligent, and this season constantly flashes back to things that sometimes we saw less than 10 minutes ago. And I don't want to seem like I'm shitting all over this series, there's some amazing stuff that we'll get to very soon, but my god, the dip in quality just shocked me. And the reason I say the creators are lying about this episode is because they have said that this wasn't intended to be a backdoor pilot, and I'm sorry, I don't believe them. If you don't know, a backdoor pilot is an episode of a show that usually centres on brand new characters and settings in the hopes to get a spin-off. And this episode is set up perfectly to be a pilot episode for these characters. We're teased with backstories and relationships that go nowhere here because they're not meant to. I will always believe that this was intended to be a pilot for a spin-off because it screams it. The new setting, the gang, the Scooby-Doo van, and the obvious lead for that show. It's all there. And they're never going to actually confirm it was a pilot because the episode flopped. This episode was hated. Of course they're gonna lie. And look, I'll be honest, I have no other proof except for this 50 minutes of television, but the way this episode is structured so differently to anything else in the show tells me that this was a plan that flopped. I couldn't quite believe just how bad this episode was. I genuinely nearly didn't watch the next one because this episode made me feel dumb and stupid. Yet thank God I did, because after delivering the worst episode of the show, they decided to follow it up with one of the best. By the time I finished The Lost Sister, I thought I knew everything I was going to say about this season. That while some of it's quite good fun and the horror, while not as consistent as season 1, is still well handled, that it's nothing compared to its first outing. Even episode 6, an episode I really enjoyed, bugged me. Someone we know should have been in the tunnels when the demidogs attacked. You can't build up a twist and have the casualties be extras number 5, 6, 7, etc. I was ready to make quite a short video about this season, and then I watched episode 8 and I was both so elated and annoyed in equal measure. Because this episode is fantastic. The constant dread that is built up as the demidogs attack Hawkins' lab is a masterful bit of storytelling. The way the plots slowly intertwine, very similarly to the season 1 penultimate episode, really worked. After plodding along for quite a few episodes, there was this sudden feeling of urgency and panic and fear, and I was gripped from the very beginning to the very end. Bob's death is handled extremely well. Now, I imagine he's something of a fan favourite. Personally, he wasn't my favourite character. I found him a little too perfect to actually really connect to him on a level that wasn't just, well, he's sweet, but his death is brutal. And it's so incredibly earned. They have so much fun building up to it, where they let the tension drag on for as long as they can, and it's just so effective. Episode 8 is basically a tale of two halves. The first part taking place at the lab, while the second takes place at Joyce's home. The whole scene with possessed Will being tied up in the shed as his friends and family try to speak to him is wonderful. Again, this season has jumped around a lot, but this episode really lets scenes breathe. Giving the audience longer to really sit in these moments allows us to feel immersed in the plot, probably for the first time this season. And the whole Morse code bit is really fun. It's simple yet a clever little plot beat. We finally get to see these characters interact with each other again, and it's so rewarding. I love how understated the Nancy and Steve scenes are in both this and the finale. Nothing's too melodramatic. It just feels raw and natural, and that's what this show needs to contrast the weirdness. And then right at the end, Eleven shows up looking like a charity shop goth, and it's a great cliffhanger leading us into the final episode. Just everything about The Mind Flayer is wonderful. The acting, the writing, the cinematography. It's definitely my favourite episode this season, and probably one of the best out of the 2 seasons I've watched so far. I adored it. And it made me so angry. Because The Mind Flayer proved that this show still has the juice. It can still provide complicated, effective and emotive storytelling when it wants to. This wasn't just luck. They didn't accidentally make a fantastic episode of TV. This is a lot of skill and hard work. So how and why did no one involved look back through the other scripts and think, hey, these aren't up to scratch? How do you read through The Lost Sister and then this and not realise the stark contrast in quality? And again, not everything before this is bad. There's some great stuff, but this story did not need to be 9 episodes long. I actually think you could tell this season was 6 episodes and it would be much stronger for it. Because all the padding, all the jumping around multiple subplots that feels pretty inconsequential, just prolonged getting to the good stuff. Another aspect I haven't touched on much yet is the demidogs themselves. At first, I didn't quite get them. The singular Demigorgon in Series 1 was much more effective than the pack of demidogs, especially as the kids have not 1 but 2 escapes from them this series down to complete and utter convenience. Nitpicks aside, I do think they work, especially in this episode. The show suddenly knows how to utilise them and make them feel like a proper threat. And if you're gonna do this, the lead up to the finale is a pretty good time to do so. The finale of Season 2 may not be as satisfying as Season 1, but to be fair to it, I enjoyed it much more than I thought I would. It does a good job at wrapping up the storyline, and there's some incredibly effective moments of horror sprinkled throughout. The Will exorcism scene is fucking brilliant. It's one of the most horrifying moments in the show, and they completely sell it. It's mad to me how young Noah Schnapp was when filming this series. Will goes through the ringer this time, and it requires some incredibly grown-up performance choices that he just sells. Once again, actually, the main kids are all amazing in this show. The cast and director knocked it out of the park. I said it last video, but I'll say it again. Imagine the Potter kids.
Oh, are you doing magic?
Actually, no, scrap that. Imagine the Doctor Who kids.
I'm not just gonna stand here and let her die.
Although the finale flirts with being too blockbuster for its own good, it is grounded in some beautiful and satisfying character work. The arcs of these characters come full circle, and some of the scenes, particularly between Eleven and Hopper, are incredibly touching. The moment when they're both in the car and Hopper finally opens up to Eleven is just a beautiful example in restraint, both in performance and writing. A scene like this can easily become melodramatic if handled wrong. I have read so many scripts that are intended to be subtle but come across as EastEnders. Here, they handle it beautifully. He even uses a black hole as an allegory and it doesn't come across as wanky, and if you ever tried writing, you'll know that it's pretty hard to do. Allegory or metaphor? He talks about holes. He talks about holes. And you get it. You fuck off. Once again, Nancy and Steve's brief moments are underplayed to perfection. Eleven finally meeting up with her old friends is beautiful. I could do without the Max jealousy. That just feels like a tired trope. But other than that, it all works. Even Mike gets a scene. Remember him from the first series? In Stranger Things 1, he's basically the main kid. But in this season, he does absolutely nothing. He's there a lot. He stands around. He's basically that meme of the guy standing alone at a party. But here, he gets to scream and punch Hopper, and it's great. That childhood innocence, the uncontrollable anger and sadness kids feel is perfectly captured. The episode does occasionally become too silly. The scene with Dustin and the fully grown foreskin, formerly known as Dart, is a proper eye-roll moment. I also think the Upside Down loses part of its menace as more and more characters easily pop in and out of it. Like this season alone, most of the kids go there, Joyce and Hopper return there, Bob goes there for some reason. Like, Bob is a man who realistically would die crossing the road, but somehow comes out of literal hell unscathed. This may seem like another nitpick, and I don't want to come across as a grumpy internet man, but I just think it's an issue that I imagine will only get worse as I continue this video series. But by the end, everything is wrapped up, and once again we get to see that character magic that both seasons of the show has been so good at. The kids dancing one by one is beautifully underplayed. Dustin and Nancy's dance is one of my favourite scenes from the show so far. It's just incredibly sweet without feeling soppy. It's all quietly moving and a lovely way to end their storyline this season. It's also a nice bookend to their first interaction of the show, her slamming the bedroom door on him. She's grown as a character, she's getting older and becoming a grown-up, and she's almost apologising for her past mistakes through helping him through this tough time in life. Hopper and Joyce's scene is also beautifully subtle. It's short, it's simple, but it says everything about grief without talking down to the audience. And then that's it. After seeing these kids battle monsters, we leave them simply dancing. We get one last little shot of the Mind Flayer in the Upside Down and cut to black. End of season 2. And this is the second lie that the dastardly Duffer Brothers have told. I do not believe for a single second that they have had the rest of the show planned out after getting renewed from season 1. Not at all. I have no proof from people in the industry of this, but this season alone is my proof. This is not how you construct a season of TV that you know for certain is gonna run for more seasons. Season 2 of Stranger Things is incredibly careful. It expands the story and for the most part does a pretty good job at it, but it doesn't offer up any more than it needs to. Every single story is wrapped up in a bow, moments are bookend, and there's even less unanswered questions this time round. Now, I'm not saying they didn't want more seasons, but I do not believe that they planned it out as this big extravagant document detailing all the twists and storylines they were going to do. Not at all. I'm actually going to make a prediction. I predict that as I go along with the show, things from both seasons that never actually needed an answer will be expanded on and answered. I think these purposely built-in moments of ambiguity will suddenly become a lifeline for them and will give them storylines that were never intended to play out. I also predict that there will be tons of unanswered stuff moving forward, that storylines will begin to make little sense and that a lot of build-up will result in little payoff. Because for season 1 and 2, I'm happy to end the show not knowing everything. That's part of the atmosphere. But as soon as you start shifting and pitching the show as an epic, as a detailed mind-melting story, then that's what I'm going to expect. Season 2 of Stranger Things is a perfectly fine piece of television. It has some wonderful moments, some brilliant episodes, and character work that I would happily use as an example to my students on how to craft character. And I know I've been a bit harsh in this video, but that's only because season 1 is pretty much a perfect season of telly, and this follow-up was always going to be judged against it. Also, if the show ended here, I would probably be less harsh on it. But as I know the show continues for 3 more seasons, I think I've clocked on to some of the cracks that will now only get bigger as I continue watching for the first time. Well, I'm actually really interested to know if you think I've been too harsh here. Please do comment and let me know. It's really weird going into a show that I know people adored but also had major issues with, but not knowing when those issues started. So let me know. Was I an arse? I'm also hoping that season 3 will answer the one burning question I have had since season 1. A question that has quite honestly kept me awake at night, but I can't Google it because I do not want to see spoilers. But I need to know because it's driving me insane. What the fuck are Eggos?